So the first quarter of the year is usually the quietest in terms of game releases. Developers are usually busy working on their stuff for the rest of the year. Publishers are looking forward to E3 as the next opportunity to really show off the stuff that they're working on. And consumers are kind of recovering from their Christmas spending, so they haven't got too much money to spend either. And all of that combines to make for a period of releases that traditionally, at least, is relatively quiet. This year has been a little bit different, I guess. It's been quite good, actually, in terms of game releases. There's been always stuff to play that's come out each week, and some really, really high-quality games have come as well. So I thought this week I would do a video looking at my 10 picks of PlayStation 4 releases for the year to date. And the first one is Attack on Titan. This is the one you're seeing here on the screen in front of you. Attack on Titan 2, or AOT 2, as it's known in European territories. This one comes to us from Koei Tecmo, and it was really built as, obviously it was built as a take on Attack on Titan, the anime and manga property, but it's also designed in such a way that I think anybody who likes good quality action games can really get into it. It's fast, it's energetic, it has a very different combat system to most other fighting games, or sorry, not fighting games, most other action games out there, and it feels really good. There's varying levels of difficulty, so it suits pretty much anybody of any skill level, and it does the franchise justice is the main thing, and it's a major franchise, major anime franchise, really popular one, and the developers have done a really good job in capturing the essence of what makes that franchise so great. So yeah, it's definitely one to look forward to or look into, even if you're not necessarily a fan of Attack on Titan. It might just convert you. Next up, we have DJ Max. Now, I'm a huge fan of rhythm games. Really, really big fan of rhythm games. I basically play anything that comes out, and I'm inclined to love pretty much anything that comes out. As long as I like the music, as long as I like the basics of the system, then I'll get really stuck into it. DJ Max is no different. This is a combination of a number of DJ Max games. The full name of this one is DJ Max Respect. This is a combination of a couple of different DJ Max games on portables and so on. So you get a lot of music in it. It's got 140 tracks, I want to say, at least. Probably more, actually. And you're constantly unlocking new ones as you play along, and it covers a whole range of different musical genres. And as you can see, it's quite a clean, simple, traditional, I guess, rhythm game style, and it's difficult, very difficult. I nearly threw my controller out the window when I was playing it for the first couple of hours, as I was trying to get to grips with the way that it challenged you. But once you get past that, once you get really into it, it's really good, and you feel really good. It does a great job of reflecting the music through the button presses, and you feel like you're a part of the music, and you're a part of the performance. And because there is so much music in there, you're not going to like every track. I'm not a big fan of R&B, for example, but I'm a big fan of J-pop and club music and all that kind of stuff, electronic music, and all of that's all kind of covered by the massive track list that this game has. So you'll get a lot of value out of it. You'll have to practice it a lot, so you'll be playing it a lot, and it becomes very addictive, and it's very time consuming, but it's rewarding as well, especially for rhythm fans. This series has a good reputation amongst hardcore fans of rhythm games, and this game really does that justice. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend it for newcomers to music games necessarily, but if you've got some experience with the genre, then definitely look into it, because you will probably love it. Next up, I'm going to put the most controversial game, I think, on the list, Dynasty Warriors 9. I know a lot of people were very disappointed with this game, including some who claim to be really serious fans of the series and all that kind of jazz, but I don't care. I love it, and so it goes on my list. I really, really do enjoy this game. I have spent about 80, 90, 100 hours or something playing it since release. I've played through with all my favourite characters. I'm going through with lesser favourite characters now, but I'm still playing it regularly, and I love it because of the way it depicts history. For me, what I come into a Samurai Warriors or Dynasty Warriors game for is the sense of history, is the way that Koei Tecmo takes the book in this case, or the real history, and then transforms that into these kind of action games, and the way that they envision ancient China or ancient Japan in the case of Samurai Warriors, and the way that they reflect that story, they draw the characters, all of that stuff is really important to me, and I feel that Dynasty Warriors 9 did it better than most other Warriors games, because it has that open world sense which really worked to the favour of kind of rooting it in the same kind of epic style as the book. And this game has fewer weapons, and it's not quite as ridiculous as previous Dynasty Warriors games. And I know that put a lot of people off, people who like to play these games for the kind of the button mashing nonsense. But for me, the kind of the more authentic, it's not realistic, but it's authentic. That authenticity is what drew me into it. And I just love exploring China and capturing castles and following through the story of the Three Kingdoms with my favourite characters, and all of that stuff is really important to me. That's what I play these games for, and Dynasty Warriors 9 did it better than any other game that Koei Tecmo has produced before. So I hope for Koei Tecmo's sake that with the next one, or with future Dynasty Warriors games, they're able to strike a better balance and appeal to kind of the traditional fan who comes for the action and the nonsense. But I do hope that they continue to build on this sense of authenticity and respect for the ancient history and the book that the game is based on. I hope they continue to build on that, because that's really what counts for me. So yes, definitely one of my favourite games of the year so far, and probably of the year in general. Next up, from the action to the more cerebral, Goichi Suda is a kind of hero of mine. I think most people who know me know that. I really respect the guy. I've actually met him a couple of times and spoken to him, and he thinks about games in a way that I find really interesting and engaging and appealing, and the way he thinks about games results in the games he produces. Now, the Silver Case was ported to modern consoles a couple of years ago. I think a year ago. The Silver Case is obviously Goichi Suda's, or is actually his first game as an independent game developer when he set up Grasshopper Manufacture. And it's old, and the remake brought it into the modern consoles, but it is basically a visual novel with quite simplistic art and all that kind of stuff. So it's for people that really like the way that Goichi Suda tells his stories. Now, the 25th Ward, which is the one that came out this year, is the sequel to the Silver Case, and it's interesting because it was actually originally just a mobile game for those old flip phones in Japan, so you actually couldn't play this game on any modern platform, and it was basically on its way out. So it was going to get to the point where there was just no way you'd even find an old flip phone that would have it on it, so you just would not be able to play the game. So this effort to bring it to modern consoles is almost an archival effort by Goichi Suda and Grasshopper Manufacturer and Nippon Ichi, who published it in the West. And it's really impressive. I obviously had never played this before. I found it really interesting to play through. It's got, as you can see from the graphics, it's a kind of noir crime story kind of environment and experience, and I really love my noir. I grew up with Raymond Chandler and The Big Sleep and all those old Humphrey Bogart films, and I really love all of that. I love the aesthetics, I love the storytelling, I like how dark and brooding and violent these things can be, and the Silver Case really plays to all of that, so it immediately drew me in. The original one immediately drew me in and really held me there. This second one, or this sequel, does exactly the same thing. I was worried that because it was originally a mobile game, especially an old mobile game, it would be very simple and very limited in how it told its story, because those phones were not very powerful, so you couldn't do too much with them. But no, it feels like it was a real sequel in the sense that it feels like a continuation of the original Silver Case in terms of the depth and complexity of the story that it's telling, and all of that comes together to make a game that I think I'd say is probably the most distinctive and most enjoyable on a very personal level that I've played so far this year. I certainly wouldn't recommend it to everyone because the storytelling can be very confusing. The game's puzzles can be absolutely maddening if you let them. It's probably best if you are inclined to get annoyed by puzzles to play this with a game guide in the background. But for all of that, the storytelling is just so good and so distinctive and so original. And this was the first time I got to experience this story, so I absolutely loved every second I had with this game, and I do hope somewhere down the track Goichi Suda gets another chance to take a look at the Silver Case, because he's out of old material now. Hopefully he can come up with some new stuff. Okay, so another one that was a little bit controversial, I guess. I seem to be liking the controversial games this year. Dissidia Final Fantasy NT is a PlayStation 4 port of an arcade game, which is in turn an arcade version of a PSP series of fighting games that Square Enix developed. And this one was controversial in the sense it doesn't really have a story mode because it has that arcade game roots, and there's not too much to do in the game beyond the 1 vs 1 or 3 vs 3 battles. And it was all quite clearly developed by Square Enix and Koei Tecmo, who were the developers in this one. It was all quite clearly designed to be an esports kind of experience, which worried me because I don't generally play esports games, but I guess the fact that I am so hooked on this one and I still play it, a month and whatever after release, tells me that there's something about the game that I obviously really like, because I just don't usually play these games. And the action's really good. The characters, I don't like the roster much, but each of the characters are very different to learn and master, and there's a great learning curve to the game. It's very skill-based, and it's quite strategic, so there's a lot of thought involved if you want to be good at the game. And yeah, I really, really have had a good time with this one. So, yeah, controversial for sure, but if you are a fan of Final Fantasy and pass this one up because of some of the reputation it had, maybe take another look at it, because it's not a traditional fighting game. It's very different to what you might be expecting when you hear the word fighting game, and I really like it for that, so it's on my list. I'm probably still going to be playing it for many months to come, especially with all the DLC characters they have coming, so hopefully some of the characters are ones I like. Next up, it's going to be a really short video. I was really umming and ahhing about putting this in there at all because VR does not video well, and I didn't want to give people a wrong impression about this game. But I love Moss so much, and I just had to mention it. So please, when you're looking at this, imagine it through a VR lens, because it doesn't... the 2D does not do it justice. When you put the goggles on in 3D, it's so immersive, and the little mouse character has so much personality and is so well animated, and it's got this great storybook vibe to it, and it's a simple, charming puzzle platformer thing, and yeah, I really, really love it. I really don't want to put people off it. This is the best VR game I've ever played, because it does such a good job of doing with the VR goggles what would be impossible without them. And if you get a chance, find somebody who has a copy of it and VR goggles and just test it out for yourself, because the 2D just doesn't do it justice. And I'm sorry that I did that, but it was the only one who's going to be able to get this onto the list. So ignore the graphics, just listen to the words. The Moss is really, really good. Top VR game for sure. Alright, so a little bit of a different one. Slice, Dice and Rice is a fighting game where one hit kind of kills, and because of that it has a very different tone to most other fighting games. This one's been around on PC for a while, but it only came out on PS4 in my part of the world anyway this year. Picked it up out of curiosity more than anything else, and fell in love with it very quickly afterwards. Because it is one hit kill, it's so technical and it's so unforgiving. That is not going to be for everyone, but for people who want to really learn it and master it, there's a lot of reward from spending the time with this game. It's also gorgeous, as you can see. It's a most amazing aesthetic, and it's like this Japanese aesthetic crossed with Mortal Kombat, and it's just a really good, very different, original, creative fighting game. It's a small, cheap download. It's not going to set you back too much money. You're probably not going to be playing it 70 years down the track, and it's not going to be remembered as a great classic of all time. But I'm very happy for the time that I've spent with this one, and for people who like the games a bit different, it's probably the one I'd recommend most from the 2018 so far. Next up, we have Yakuza, which is also another new one. New as in it's out very soon. I'm not sure if it's actually available widely yet. I've been able to review it because embargo's lifted, which is why I put it in this video. If it's not out right now, then make sure you get it when it comes out, because it is absolutely brilliant. Everything. I wrote a very in-depth review about it, so I'm not going to go into all that depth again. But for me, Yakuza is about the storytelling, the world building, and the characters. And Yakuza 6 really checks off all of those with amazing skill and talent, and the developers should be very proud about what they've done here. It tells, anybody who's played a Yakuza game knows that it's got the most amazing open world, in that it's quite a small open world compared to Grand Theft Auto or Horizon or whatever. But packed into that is so much to do. Every couple of steps there's a new shop that you can visit, or a new attraction that you can do, or there's a new side quest that gets dumped on you if you choose to do it. You can easily get distracted from the main quest for dozens of hours at a time, and to the point where you forget that there's a kind of a main story to work through. But that's not to say that the main story is bad either. It's really strong, especially this one, because it's the 6th game in the series, or actually technically the 7th, because there was a Yakuza 0 as well. But as the kind of the 7th game in the series, it's the end of the story of Kiryu, the main character here, and he's a character that a lot of people have grown to love. He's a bit of an anti-hero in that he is Yakuza and is a tough guy, but has a very honourable streak and ends up doing the right thing by everybody anyway. And the game tells such a great story about the kind of the underground lives of Yakuza in the world and what they get up to, I guess. It is notable that there was a journalist that actually got real-life Yakuza to play Yakuza 3 back when that was new, and they gave it the tick of approval. So, it's obviously not realistic, because that would be no fun to play. But it is much like kind of Dynasty Warriors, which I was talking about earlier. It's very authentic to the kind of the experience and the lives of Yakuza, and I always say this, whenever I play one of these games, I end up getting quite homesick for Japan. Not because I have anything to do with Yakuza, of course, but because the city's so well rendered, and I really feel like, the stuff that you can get up to, the side attractions and all of that kind of stuff is all very much the Japanese experience. So I always play these games and then kind of start to research plane tickets to Japan and what the price are at that time, because it's a very special game to me for that. It's a massively executed, narrative-driven open world experience, and if you haven't played one, then make this one your first, because it is brilliant, and then you'll have to go and play the rest of them after that. Very different change of pace this time around. Yakuza obviously been all action all the time. Well, not quite, but it's a very busy game. Railway Empire. Now, Railway Empire comes to us from Calypso, who is a kind of mid-tier publisher who focuses on strategy, RPGs, and other things. And yeah, it's notable because this is the kind of game that you would never expect to come out on console. You constantly get told by the developers of these kinds of simulation games that console doesn't do it very well. The controller doesn't work for simulations or whatever. But something like Railway Empire absolutely proves that to be completely inaccurate and incorrect. The goal of the game is very simple. You need to build a railway empire. That's where the name comes from. And you connect cities up with train stations. You need to put train stations out near farms so produce can get into the cities. And if you build up the network well, the cities grow around you and you make more money, obviously, because more passengers use the trains, more businesses use the trains. And as you make more money, you can connect more cities and so on and so forth. So it becomes... It's a good example of, I guess, it's a good simulation of how logistics actually affects the development of cities, because I think a lot of people don't really think about these kinds of things, but then they play a game like this and they realise, the movement of goods and services wouldn't be the same without trains and infrastructure and all that kind of stuff. And it's an interesting way of looking at a small section of, I guess, how economies work, and then focusing on those, and then giving players a very easy and accessible and enjoyable game that simulates, that kind of that part of the economy. And I guess the other great thing is you can actually ride the trains. It's really cool. The game goes through the whole history basically of railways in America, and you get to sit on the trains and watch as the actual railway develops and the trains modernise and all that kind of stuff, from very primitive trains right through to the more advanced beasts that science discovers later on. Really good game, very much recommend it for Sim fans. I couldn't not include Shadow of the Colossus, of course, on this list because it's a very old game now. It was originally a PlayStation 2 title, but the remaster is so extensive that it almost feels like a new game anyway. The graphics are completely modernized. There's so much more detail in the environments. So, and they've taken a chance, the opportunity to kind of refine parts of the gameplay that people found frustrating from the PS2 original as well. So, Shadow of the Colossus probably needs no introduction. It is an adventure game, a puzzle adventure game, kind of in the vein of Zelda. I mean, people used to call it kind of Sony's answer to Zelda. It's really a very different experience. But you go through a huge world, destroying these colossal beasts, the Colossus. And with each Colossus that you defeat, you get one step closer, so you think, to reviving the girl that you just saw in the footage, who is revealed, who's dead at the start of the adventure. There's a whole... You could write an entire book on the kind of the way that the story then explores the idea of what you're doing, the destructive acts that you're doing in order to try and save the girl, and the morality behind that, and the way that the game kind of investigates that. It's deep, it's complex, it's impossible to really talk about to any extent in a short video. I'm certainly not going to do that, but the point is that this is a game that really makes you think and really makes you feel, and it's such an emotionally engaging game for so many people. There are so many people out there that would say that this is their favourite game of all time. Everybody was so excited when there was a port announced, a remaster announced for the PlayStation 4, and Sony has not disappointed on any level whatsoever. This is a masterpiece, a genuine masterpiece, and it has been remastered in a way that such a game deserves. And I think for people who haven't played it, they absolutely should play it. For people who did play the PS2 game before, it's worth looking at again. You might not expect it, but there's enough added to it that it feels fresh, and it will inspire you all over again because it is such a great game. So yes, Shadow of the Colossus, definitely play this one. One of the top of all time, let alone the first quarter of 2018. And I'm cheating, I'm putting another 10 in because I couldn't not talk about Lost Sphere as well, so it's kind of a top 11, but, that doesn't sound as cool, does it? So, Lost Sphere is by Tokyo RPG Factory and published by Square Enix, and it's a game for people that really like their RPGs retro, and it was designed definitely to be inspired, or to be heavily reminiscent of 16-bit RPGs from the Super NES era in particular, but with a kind of 3D modern aesthetic coat of paint over the top of it. And it works. It's not the world's greatest RPG, and I don't think this one will be remembered by a lot of people as well as the likes of Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI are, obviously. But it tells a really good story, and it does so in a very clean, efficient, and effective way. It's so easy to mess up retro-style RPGs, and if you don't believe me, go and play some of Kemco's retro RPGs on phone or Switch or PS4. They put them on every console known to man, and they're terrible. They are all very bad. They look like retro RPGs, but they don't show any respect for or understanding of what people loved about retro RPGs. And for me, Lost Sphere, and it comes from the same developer that did I Am Setsuna before it, and that was the same deal. These two games really show that the developer understands what people love about those old RPGs, and it's not a combat system. People like combat systems. They'll talk about them a lot when they talk about these games, but it's not combat that makes people love these games, and it's not short, kind of snippy dialogue or whatever. Those games really told deep stories, but with an efficiency of language. And if you're a Kemco, you cut your dialogue right down and you make it very short and sharp, and there's no depth to it. Or you go the other way and you write too much, and it no longer feels like a retro JRPG. So these developers have created something that really moves along at a nice pace. It's not a very long game by any means. It's about, I think I finished it in 30 hours. So it's a short JRPG, but it tells a deep story within that, and a powerful story and an interesting story. It creates good characters. It has a decent workable battle system. So for me, it ticks all the boxes of what I'm looking for in a retro JRPG, and I really like it. So it's kind of a bonus, like I said. I'm not saying that this is the top 10 of the year to date, but I just wanted to mention it because, yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I think it's a quality game. So anyway, there's not another secret number 12, so that really is the end of the video. Thanks for watching, really appreciate it, and let us know what your favourite games of this year have been so far.